Welcome back to the Control the Chaos Mama podcast, where we do life and launch strategy for creative rebels and ADHD entrepreneurs. And we really get down to how we can get the ideas from your head and out into the world where they belong. So if you're anything like me, you're going to definitely need to write some notes on this episode, because today we are going to talk about 6 ways to restructure your time so that you can have more focus, more productivity, and quit hating on yourself. You know you do it, but basically we're going to break down a couple things to organize your day so that you will start to feel more confident and less like you're lost and like a mess and like, what's wrong with me? So that's the goal for today. So I invite you to come over to the Facebook group, come on over to Instagram. Let's kind of continue this conversation, because I know there's way more strategy, way more ways, especially if we come together. All right, so number 1, what I want you to do is, of course, do the big picture strategy, but also break those large tasks into micro tasks. So what we tend to do is whenever we're going to even do our 3 things we want to do today, because we've all heard that by now, right? We will make them such big things. So for instance, for me, maybe it's like, I want to record my podcast. Well, that's not just record the podcast. That is record the podcast, edit the podcast, upload the podcast, put some show notes in there, like all of these things. Maybe make a headliner clip. Like, I want you to take one task and break it up into chunks. And so these micro tasks really need to be 15 minutes or less, because let's be real, we also want to times 3 on all of the things that we're thinking that we can do. We tend to have some time blindness. We almost seem to have some resistance from that scheduling, from like making ourselves do something, especially if we're not doing it out of fun, but more so a deadline. And the next one is short bursts, which I kind of mentioned, but what I want you to do, whether that is the Pomodoro method where you do 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of active rest, hopefully where you're getting up and moving your body, but use a timer. Like, don't think that you're going to be able to remember. And this is actually really hard for me, because I will zone in on a task and I will start to get like hyper focused in a way that it's harder for me to actually stop sometimes than to start the task, especially if it's something I enjoy, like podcasting. All right, so we have breaking those large tasks into micro tasks. We have take breaks or have short bursts of windows where you're going to actually focus on getting those tasks done. And then the third one is exercise. And so whether that is jumping up in those 5 minutes of rest and doing some jumping jacks or taking the dog out for a walk, there is something to be said about moving our bodies. I always will end up doing some boxering and doing like a walk talk, because my ideas will really start to go and I'll start to feel more energized about my work. So the power of putting your shoes on, put them on, go for a walk around the block or something like that to just kind of get your blood flowing and get that movement. And I think that really helps for us to think, honestly. And then number 4 is lists, schedules, and rituals. And so I know for sure in a big way, I resist this. It's like the idea of having something on my to-do list. I become a big baby about it. It's like, why did I self-inflict this? Even just yesterday, I had a view and order appointment, which I wanted to do. I wanted to show them their pictures. I wanted to present them and stuff. But this idea that this was on my list it was just a Thursday evening. It kind of like wore on me all day. And it's like, why am I mad about this? A friend of mine even said, hey, Angel, it's a payday. Like, why are you not wanting to go and get paid? Like, come on. And it's like, the way we just think about it, I feel like. And so if you have these rituals or lists or schedules that are flexible structure, I think that works best. So what is flexible structure? So to me, I like to work in time blocks. And I do take the time blocks from child focused to me focused as much as I can. I do have young kids still in the house. My kids actually range from 2 to 17, so say a prayer. But what that tends to look like is in the morning, I can have me time, which could end up being things that I need for the house or for the business or for me or whatever. And sometimes I can't get myself to wake up before the kids. So I have to convince myself that I can do whatever I want if I wake up before the kids. And yeah, it's a trick. So sometimes I have to trick my mind. Maybe you do too. Sometimes in order to get myself to fold the laundry, I have to tell myself, Angel, you only have to fold the hoodies. You only have to fold the towels or whatever that is. You only have to do this job for 2 minutes and then you can stop. The thing is once we get started, we get the momentum and we usually continue. But if we can make it smaller, then maybe we'll do it, right? And then what I want you to do with those time blocks is do that shift. And so instead of having it to where it's a giant chunk of kid time. Maybe you can break it up to where they could do some independent play. Maybe you guys could get outside, but like mix it up. I think that's helpful too. And then remember, times 3, all of those things you want to get done. And so I think that's really important. What I found that I'm trying to do is to really simplify the morning. I need to get outside early. I need to go and fill their tire tank. And it helps me to feel like a better mom. I do know that once I do that and kind of stay farther away from my phone, I just feel better about myself overall. I'm less like hating myself or getting down on myself when it comes to feeling like I'm not showing up for that role. So it's kind of like at the end of the day, if you complete these certain tasks, like make sure they're ones that are really important to you as for your identity. So like I can work all day and do a hyper focus and be like crushing my to-do list. But if I'm not showing up in a big way to either myself, whether that's movement or what I ate or my kids when it comes to, like playing with them and getting outside and, teaching them stuff, I know that I can still be down on myself even though I was productive, if that makes sense. And so I know that I've talked about in the past about habit stacking. There's, again, I mentioned the 2-minute rule. Like you can kind of trick yourself with some of these strategies. So go back and listen to those episodes if you haven't got a chance, because those are gold when it comes to tricking our brains into doing the thing. But also just knowing that you can shift from kid focus to you focus. And I know that your day might not fall like that, but if you can break those time blocks and make them big though, then it'll be much easier. Kind of like before the kids wake up, and then when they are up, and maybe midday block and then an afternoon block. We have a whole episode of that, so go and check that out. And it is called, I believe, How to Hack Your Time Blocks. And so go check that out. And then the last one I have is frequent feedback and reinforcement. And so what that's going to look like is kind of that body doubling where you're going to have someone check in on you. So the reason we kind of tend to procrastinate, I believe everyone is a procrastinator, first of all, is that we have typically a deadline or something to meet, right? And that gives us that accountability, but it also gives us kind of that feeling of a deadline to where we know that we don't want the shame. We don't want to feel like we don't have our life together if we don't make this deadline. We don't want to let someone down. We want to show up for that person, right? And so it's not only about us. And I feel like that's really helpful in helping us to get things done. The problem is that if we don't put that deadline in, or we don't have that coach or that person that's keeping us accountable as entrepreneurs, then we can literally keep moving the date. And yes, sometimes I want you to move the date. Give yourself grace. Realize that like my energy is low and I need to focus on this self-care piece, or I need to focus on my kids. Maybe your kid's struggling in school or something like that, and you need to pull back in one area of your life so that you can really zone in. And I think that it's amazing that we have the power to do that as entrepreneurs. So definitely do that, but also know that if you can go and pick when you're going to launch or when you're going to do this thing and tell the world, that you will be so much more likely to do it. And it's even going to exponentially rise the more that you show up for it and you talk about it, for instance, on your stories or that sort of thing. You're almost taking people along with you and letting them be your accountability. And I think that is an amazing thing. So whether that's your audience, whether that is a coach, whether that's a mastermind group, I know I have a great group of women who support me and who are in my Voxer chats. And so whatever that looks like for you, and if you don't have that, then it's going to feel very lonely, and it's also going to make it to where you're just less likely to finish, almost even if you just forget. So it's really helpful for someone to say, what is it that you want? Okay, what is it that you need to do to get there? And then you are deciding, you have the choice as to what those things are, but you have someone to remind you of them. And so I think that is something that is amazing, because without those reminders, we almost kind of get off track. So it's kind of like there are rumble strips on the side of the road to where we can kind of like course correct. So you need a course corrector. And so just to recap, we have break large tasks to micro tasks, do work in short bursts, do some exercise or movement, have some lists, schedules, and rituals, or those big time blocks, and then also have the frequent feedback or like the reinforcement loop of a accountability partner or something like that. And then lastly is the freedom of choice. And so I think that is so important to kind of embrace that and realize that not only you stop the shame cycle. Do you know what I mean? So you have the power of choice to where you can choose to move things around, that you have the power of being able to ask for help and say, it's not getting done today, and that's okay. And so I think that that's really important. And for instance, it was really sunny today. And so I spent much of my day outside instead of doing a lot of the stuff that I probably, quote unquote, needed to do. Maybe switching that word need and want sometimes I think is so incredibly important. And so I hope this was helpful in helping you to restructure your time and to help you focus and get some more productivity while also giving yourself some grace. Wishing you joy and abundance, Angel. If you found value in today's show or you learned something new, do me a favor and screenshot this episode and share it over on your IG stories. You can tag me at controlthechaosmama_ADHD, and I would love to hear what you're thinking of the show. What is it that you want to hear more of? And also, let's build some community. It's just so much easier when we're all together. Let's take this one day at a time, together.